Hello and welcome to the Music GCSE YouTube channel. This video is part of a series on the Concerto Through Time, and this video is an introduction to the concerto. So what will you learn in this video? We're going to take a look at what a concerto is, the periods of composition for the concerto, what an orchestra is, the different sections of the concerto, and some important keywords you are going to need to know for this area of study. So, what is a concerto? A concerto is a piece of music written for a soloist and an orchestra. The soloist takes the leading role within the piece and the orchestra adds the accompaniment. The concerto developed and evolved over time, and you need to know about three periods of composition for the concerto. Those periods of composition are the Baroque period, which was 1600 to 1750, the Classical period, which was 1750 to 1810, and the Romantic period, which was 1810 to 1900. In your exam, if you're asked to identify the period of composition an extract has been taken from, you will not need to write the dates, you just need to write the name of the period of composition, such as Baroque, Classical or Romantic. And as part of this video series, we will look at the unique characteristics of each of those periods of composition. Now, the fundamentals of the concerto remain the same throughout all periods of composition, but each time period does have its own distinct sound and typical features and identity. So, like I just said, we will look at that in future videos within this video series. We've already mentioned the word orchestra a few times, but what is an orchestra? An orchestra is an ensemble, that's a group of musicians made up of different instruments from different instrument families. The size of the orchestra changed throughout the periods of composition. As new instruments were invented, more instruments were added and the size of the orchestra increased. For example, the Baroque period had a very small orchestra. When we go through to the Romantic period, it had a really big orchestra. So, like I just said, the orchestra is made up of four instrument families. Those families are the string family, which contains instruments such as the violin, the viola, the cello, the double bass and the harp. The woodwind family, which contains instruments such as the clarinet, flute, oboe and bassoon. The brass family, which contains instruments such as the trumpet, French horn, trombone and tuba. And the percussion family, which contains instruments such as the timpani drums, the xylophone, the cymbals and the triangle. This is by no means an extensive list of these instruments in these instrument families, but these are some of the most common instruments that we might find and hear within these instrument families. Now let's take a look at the sections of the concerto. This is another common thread throughout the different periods of composition. So within the concerto we have the tutti section. In the tutti section, that means everybody in the orchestra performs at the same time. We also have the solo section. This is where the soloist takes the spotlight. The orchestra will still play, but only to provide the accompaniment. And within the classical and romantic periods, we have the cadenza. The cadenza is an unaccompanied passage where only the soloist plays and the orchestra stops. This is the soloist's time to shine. It's their moment to really show their technical ability and skill on their instrument. Again, the cadenza is only found in the classical and romantic period. The Baroque concerto did not have a cadenza, but we'll learn more about that when we look at those periods of composition in more detail. And the last thing we're going to look at in this video is some important keywords you're going to need to know for this area of study, starting with the correct words for dynamics. Remember, dynamics in music means the volume in which we play at. So the dynamic words you need to know are piano, which means to play quiet, mezzopiano, which means moderately quiet, mezzoforte, which means moderately loud, and forte, which means to play loud. We also need to know some describing words for articulation. Two of these we've already looked at in previous videos. Legato, which means to play something smoothly. Staccato, which means to play something disjointed. We also need to know some articulation words for string instruments, such as arco, which means to play an instrument such as a violin with a bow. Or pizzicato, which means to play an instrument like a violin where we pluck the strings and don't use a bow. Have a listen to how arco and pizzicato sound different. I'm going to play you a violin being played arco, and then I'm going to play you a violin being played pizzicato. We also need to know two other really important keywords for this area of study. We need to know the word virtuoso, A virtuoso is somebody who has mastered their instrument. The virtuoso will be the soloist in a concerto. And the word virtuosic, which is used to describe really complex playing on an instrument. So if we were to use that word in context, we could say that the soloist is playing virtuosically. So this video is just an introduction to the concerto, and we will look at the different periods of composition in more detail in future videos. Now that you've watched this video and you know a little bit about the concerto, why not test yourself on some of the common knowledge and common words you're going to need to know for this area of study. If you've liked this video and found it useful, don't forget to click the thumbs up and give it a like. If you haven't already done so, click the logo to subscribe and click over here to have a look at another video. You can also use the GCSE Music revision resources at www.musicgcse.co.uk.